but I was still very unhappy in Amsterdam, and Otto knew somebody in London who had a photographic studio, and he got me a place here in Woburn Place. It was a nice studio, and I became here an apprentice for a year, and I lived in Cricklewood in a little boarding house, and a Czech woman she made her living. She had about 6, 7 people living there. And there was a boy from Israel who came to study economics. And we became friends, and we went for long walks. We both didn't have any money. And we talked about all kinds of things, but never about who we were, about our past. And then after about 6 months, he said to me, Eva, I fall in love with you. Will you marry me? And we can start a new life, go to Israel. And I said, no, thank you. And I said, why? I said, well, I've got a widowed mother in Amsterdam. We were very, very close, as you can imagine. We phoned all the time and wrote all the time, and she knew everything what was going on, and I confided in her with everything. I said, you know, I'm going back to Amsterdam. I can't leave her on her own. And then Otto, he had some businesses here, and he looked a bit after me, came over one day, and I told him that, and he said, but I told him that, your mother and me have fallen in love as well, and once you get settled, we like to get married. So I said, okay. I was a bit surprised at that. And so I went to this young man and said to him, you know, you can marry me now. And he was quite shocked. And, you know, we didn't really know each other, not at all. I had told him I was Dutch, which I wasn't, because I didn't get nationality. I was still stateless, really. He said he was Israeli, which I thought was quite interesting, and he wasn't. He was really German, but a refugee. And but you know, we've been married 63 years, so it shows you it was after all the right decision. You know, people get engaged for 10 years and then they marry and then they get divorced. But we knew each other for 6 months, and it seemed to have been all right, you know. So. We got married in Amsterdam, and then when my mother met him, she asked him not to take me to Israel, because at that time, in the 50s, you didn't fly. It was very expensive, and you know, it was far, and my mother said, well, it's my only child, and you know, stay in England, because otherwise I won't see my child anymore, and especially when you get children. So we stayed here, which was, after the war, not so difficult to get papers. So we became British, and I worked as a photographer, and our first daughter was born in 1956. We have 3 daughters, which became Otto's grandchildren. My mother, of course, was her grandmother, but so Otto had again a family. So yeah, this is basically, and I never talked about what has happened, not to my children, not to my husband. People didn't talk about it, you know. And in 1986, in the meantime, in Amsterdam, the Anne Frank house became a museum, and the people in Amsterdam decided not everybody can come in Amsterdam to see the history. No, it was not just Anne, but about the war and all that, the persecution. And so they made a traveling exhibition. And the first one in 1986 came to London. And of course, Otto had died. He had died in 1980. He was 91 years old. My mother was 17 years younger than he. And so she had come over here. She still lived in Switzerland. And we were, of course, invited. It was Ken Livingston who organized this exhibition. And there was bigger than this, a room, and there was a podium, and they sat about 5, 6 people. And they all spoke very movingly about that event and what had happened, about the exhibition, and there were all kinds of things. And then he said to me, Eva will come and sit with us at the head table, which I just did. And then at the very end, he said, and now Eva will want to say a few words to you. Well, I didn't. I'd never spoken. I was still very shy. I wanted to hide myself really under the table. But I got up, and everybody looked very expectantly at me. And eventually, after 40 years, everything came flooding out, and they couldn't stop me. And that was for me really a watershed. I realized that people were interested. Afterwards, many people came to me wanting to know more, and it was important. And then this exhibition traveled all over England, and they always asked me to open it. Well, I wasn't a speaker. My husband wrote a speech to me, which I read badly and nervously, always had to take a tranquilizer before I had to do that. And then I didn't like how he put it. You know, a woman says it in a different way from a man. So eventually I changed things, and eventually I just found my own voice. And then people said, you know, you have such an interesting story yourself, you should really write a book. And I did that then, the first book which came out, Eva's Story, in 1988. And after I've written, you know, I could let go. Because till then, I knew really every little detail. It was imprinted in my brain. But afterwards, and 10 years later, when people ask me a little detail, I very often said, oh, I have to look it up in my book. And that was really, you know, a relief. And then, you know, I will tell you about my second book, The Promise. Well, that is really about my brother, mainly. I told you he was so a sensitive boy. When he was 12 years old, he said to me one day, what will happen when we die? I'm afraid. And I said, well, I don't know, but let's ask our father, who has answers to everything. And we went to him, and he said, Papi, what will happen when I die? And my father said, well, if you have children, you will live on in your children. And then this 12-year-old boy said, but what if I die before I have any children? And my father thought a minute, and he said, well, I promise you, whatever you have done, whatever you have achieved, somebody will remember. We are all a link in a long generation, which goes on and on. Nothing is ever lost. And so he had to accept his answer. And so a few years ago, I decided I'm going to keep the promise to Heinz and my father that he won't be forgotten, like having given the paintings to the museum when many, many people can see it. It has been actually now in the West London Synagogue, had copies made, and some of them were shown there. And perhaps I'm going to bring it once here to the Jewish Museum. They're really amazing pictures. And as well, the poems, they're, of course, in Dutch. And, but for this book, I had some translated. And I'm going to end with reading one of it to you. Don't cry, Mama. Mama, do I have to die already? I heard the doctor say so. Please, Mama, don't cry. Heaven is such a beautiful place, and soon we'll be together again. Mama, what will my little sister say when she wants to play with me again? Please, Mama, don't cry. After all, I'll be seeing Dad again. He's been waiting up there so long already. Remember to take good care of the kitten. She loves me so. Please, Mama, don't cry. Do you still love me as much as ever? Are you still with me? Please tell me. Please hold my hand for just a minute. It seems so misty in the room. Please tell me, Mama. Don't cry. Mama, just one more thing. Please kiss me goodbye. He was just 17 years old when he wrote that.